On this week's show, after a 4-game road trip, the Georgia Southern Eagles finally return home, and who's waiting for them but their old rivals, the Appalachian State Mountaineers. We'll preview Thursday night's matchup and have much more as we welcome you inside the Eagles' nest. And welcome inside the Eagles' nest. I'm your host, Josh Aubrey, being joined by sports editor and Georgia Southern beat writer for the Statesboro Herald, Mike Anthony. And Mike, once again we get on here and we're talking about a Georgia Southern win, and once again we're getting on here.
Fly the W.
And we've got questions and concerns as the Eagles prepare for arguably their biggest game of the season with their biggest rival, which there is no arguing, is Appalachian State. Before we get into the App State game, let's reflect back on the New Mexico State game, a game that both of us got on here and predicted high scores. Mine was a little higher than yours predicting, but we also both predicted they'd win by a lot more than 3. And I think we both thought this was just what the doctor ordered for the Eagles, a team that gives up over 40 points a game. Maybe they can work on some things, make people kind of forget what's happened if they score 40 or 50 points. Didn't exactly happen. They scored 22. Your thoughts on the New Mexico State game?
Well, it's good to at least be able to talk about, what was good in a win rather than trying to pick out silver linings out of a loss. So the most important thing is it's another win. It's another conference win, 3-1 now in Sun Belt play. So yeah, New Mexico State, not the strongest opponent. So you could have easily expected, even for a team on a 3-game losing streak, you could have easily expected a much better performance for the Eagles, a much bigger margin of victory. But in the end, the Eagles did what they had to do. They were struggling a little bit early on. Once again, like in the Arkansas State game, a lot of opportunities that either weren't turned into points or that were turned into field goals instead of touchdowns. So instead of having a game where you could have been out in front, leading all the way, instead they find themselves down for a good chunk of the game. But hand it to the Eagles, they got solidly better both offensively and defensively as the game went on. They're able to turn the momentum around, and once they got out in front, they were able to stay out in front.
Well, they keep doing things that kind of remind you that they're capable of offensively, like the screen pass to Wesley Fields or the pass to Breida, which was one of his few touchdowns on the season. In fact, to this point, he has as many rushing touchdowns as Troy Stewart. I don't think that any of us would have thought that at this stage in the game. We'd love to see Matt Breida get back to what he was before. I don't know that that's going to be possible. But one thing we did see that we weren't really sure was coming was A, Fabian Upshaw out for the game, and B, Seth Schumann loses his red shirt, comes in, completes a couple of passes, wasn't exactly, perfect. He was 4 of 12 with an interception, but, there were some moments there, and I guess the question becomes, are we going to see more of Schumann? Because, that may be what the future is at Georgia Southern.
Well, not only is he the future, but he could easily be part of the present, because even if Upshaw is able to get back on the field, it doesn't take in-depth coaching ability to see that both Ellison and Upshaw have taken some bumps and bruises. They're limping around more than they were at the beginning of the year. So I think, if nothing else, Schumann got thrown into the fire a little bit, got some experience. Maybe they need him to come off the bench again, even if both Ellison and Upshaw return to their normal amount of snaps. You never know. All it takes is one hit. What if Georgia Southern has things turned around? They're playing a Georgia State or a Troy late in the year with a chance to be in contention for the conference title. If one of those top 2 quarterbacks goes down, I guess it's good to have a guy that you believe in, that you think can run the offense, or maybe a slightly different version of the offense. You've certainly seen that 4 of 12, yeah, not the best, but he looked poised, he looked confident. Most importantly of all, for a true freshman going into a game with a lot of playmakers who are juniors, seniors, who have started for a while, it looked like he had the trust of the team. So the completions maybe can be worked on, but it at least looks good that he looks like he belongs in that huddle.
Were you surprised at all that they went with Schumann instead of LeGarrette Anthony or another freshman that they have on the bench as well? There's a couple guys that they could have pulled from. It looks like they went with Schumann, and I wonder myself if that has to do with the fact that he played for Rance Gillespie at Valdosta State.
It could be. It depends, I think. As far as that goes, I think it depends on how much is actually all that similar to what was being run at Valdosta, what's trying to be established here at Georgia Southern. But I think that he's just proven it during practice in some scrimmages. You've seen him go up against, if you've been to practice, you've seen him go up against a defense that at times has looked pretty good. They can definitely be scary when they're coming at you. And he's been able to find receivers, make some plays. So I think that, if anything, his number might have been called just on merit based on what they've done, directing the scout team, directing the second or third team in practice. So, Schumann, I guess it helps if he is the best of them all that he's also the youngest of them all. Gives him time to work in, not be dependent on to do too much, and maybe take the reins next year.
Well, we'll get into some of the questions that we asked Coach coming up in the segment in just a moment. But before we get to that, the Appalachian State game coming up this week. I mentioned to him a couple years ago with Satterfield up at App State, midway through 6-7 games in the season. The fans up there were wondering if they had the right coach. A lot of them were calling for him to be fired. It's a very similar situation down here, although the record's a little bit better than what Satterfield had up there. And then boom, all of a sudden, App State picked up a few wins and went on to win out on the season and became a very, one of the upper echelon teams in the Sun Belt. Do you think that that's something that could eerily be familiar coming up this week with Georgia Southern playing, of all teams, App State?
Well, that's definitely the scenario that I think people can hope for. And the thing that helps that to possibly come true is you look at the roster for Georgia Southern and you've got a lot of explosive and proven players on there. So at any point, if things click, this is a team that can go out there, put some big scores on people, put some big hits on people. It's a team full of guys who's run through this conference before. So I think that you can hope for that to happen, but it needs to happen sooner rather than later, because if it gets to the end of the season and you're still at a wishy-washy, middling 500, you aren't quite sure what you are, well, you're really going to be unsure going into the offseason because a lot of guys are going to be vacating a lot of big roles on this team after the season.
All right, as for the game coming up Thursday night, Georgia Southern and App, obviously the biggest rival Georgia Southern has, I guess you could argue at one point, maybe 10 years ago, Furman because of the national championships, but there's no doubt Georgia Southern and App, and then they both joined the Sun Belt together. They both have fairly immediate success. The Eagles winning the Sun Belt the first year, App in their last year, and now they meet on the field despite what Georgia Southern's struggles have been this year, despite the fact that App State comes in rolling. We've seen bad Georgia Southern teams beat App State. We've seen bad App State teams beat Georgia Southern. Your thoughts on this game with Appalachian State?
Well, I think it's going to be the most emotional game you'll see the Eagles play all year. They showed that they could come out with a lot of fire early in the season, sometimes at their detriment, still working on some penalties, sometimes at inopportune moments because of emotional plays. So against App State, there's going to be talking, there's going to be hitting. What helps the Eagles is that for the first time in over a month, they get to do it in their backyard. So I think that's key to the game, as Coach Summers has talked about, the ability to come out early, win plays in the game early, get out to an early lead. If Georgia Southern can do that, get out to a lead on App with the kind of atmosphere that's going to be already surrounding Paulson Stadium, I think you start to see, like you said, something clicking, something turning on. It turned into a hornet's nest 2 years ago on this same situation, a Thursday night game with App in town. I think you could see the same thing, maybe not with quite the same point total put up against App's defense, but definitely a game that Georgia Southern can grab some momentum and hang on against an App team that, while great on defense, hasn't exactly been lighting it up on offense.
Now, you mentioned how good they've played on defense. One of the things that really stands out is one of Georgia Southern's Achilles heel, and that is the fact that App State is one of the best teams in the nation inside the red zone defensively. Georgia Southern has tended to be one of the worst teams in the red zone when it comes to offense. It doesn't make you feel real confident if things go the way they've been going with their ability to stop and Georgia Southern's inability to get points inside.
Well, when you look at matchups and how you're going to attack an opponent, a lot of coaches will say that, they pay attention to what the other team does defensively, but you don't want to let that take you out of what you're trying to do. I think that this is a case where, while Georgia Southern doesn't need to be afraid of App's defense, it definitely could benefit from throwing a curveball. What Georgia Southern's been doing so far this year has worked just a little bit at best, and it kind of counters what App State tries to do. They're a fast team. They can run sideline to sideline. Georgia Southern's been trying to do that and not doing very well at it. So maybe you try to use that speed against them, some counters, some more screens, some misdirection. They probably aren't going to be able to out-athlete App State outside of the Power 5 teams that Georgia Southern plays. This is the first time in a long time they've been able to say that about an opponent, is that they probably can't just line up and run it right at this guy, right at that guy. So if you can get that guy and all his momentum and speed going the wrong direction, maybe you open up those big plays. If you do that, you get a good defense on its heels. A good defense, even a great defense, if it's on its heels, if it's waiting for you to do something, that's when you can make things happen offensively.
All right, well, we had a chance to talk with head coach Tyson Summers and some of the players about the matchup Thursday night with App State.
App is big. I mean, App's, again, everybody that is associated with App State or Georgia Southern understands what this game means. And whether you were in conference play or not in conference play, it is a big game. It's important to our players, it's important to our fan base, and it's certainly a big deal to me as well. As you sit there and look at it, with Coach Satterfield, he's done a great job and has a tremendous staff. And they really do a great job. They play hard, they play with their hands well and get off blocks, they run the ball well, and they do all the little things well, and I think that, like you said, it's very important for us to be able to, if we're going to be where we want to be at the end of the year, we've got to go down this road and we've got to try to find a way to get our win.
And you will get to be home for a change,
yes.
And that's got to be a huge thing for you guys.
It is. It's been tough traveling and being on the plane and being away, but I'm just glad that I'm back here in Appalachian Stadium in front of the fans, and I just miss that Georgia Southern chant, and we're all excited to be back, and we hope there's a lot of people come to the game this Thursday.
Fourth quarter show what we really couldn't do. We scored 17 points in 5 minutes, so we still have an explosive offense. We just have to start from the beginning and finish the way we need to finish, the way we finished last Saturday. We can't play that way against Appalachian State. Very good defense, good offense, very physical team. Play with a lot of effort, but we do the same thing here. So it's gonna be a dogfight, and we expect to come out with the win.
Playing App State, it's been a rivalry for years, and it's a pretty exciting feeling. Play those guys. Finally back in Paulson. Also a national televised game, so it's a very exciting feeling. Bring a lot of emotion and to the game. So a lot of guys are just excited for that.
What's it like to finally be back home? I imagine you guys have almost forgotten what it's like.
Finally being back in Paulson Stadium is an awesome feeling. Be on the road for almost a month now, and just be back, excited.
All right, Mike, it's that time of the show where we get your prediction. What you think the score is going to be here between Appalachian State and Georgia Southern?
Well, I know that I was a little bit down last week. I wasn't overly confident. I'm still not sold that Georgia Southern's turned a corner, but they're definitely trending in the right direction. No matter how close it was against a pretty bad New Mexico State team, it's still a win. It was a win 2,500 miles away from home, a win on the 4th consecutive road game. So it tells me something about the determination of this team. They're going to be more determined than ever on Thursday night. I don't think the short week's going to bother them. The rivalry game, the adrenaline's going to be enough to make up for a few less days to prepare. I think they finally come out, get the first blow, get ahead early. A bunch of students and fans get on their side, and they hang on in the defensive struggle. I like it to be close, 17-14, Georgia Southern with the upset.
All right, well, many first-year head coaches at Georgia Southern have had
3 in a row, I believe.
Some success against Appalachian State in their first time around. I think it'll keep going and trending in that direction. I like the Eagles winning in this one 20-17. A Younghoe Koo field goal wins it for the Eagles.
Younghoe Koo, your special teams player of the week.
As well as he should be. He has been the one constant throughout the season for the Eagles. Mike, before we go, let's get people up to date on some other sports around there. The Georgia Southern men's soccer team amongst the highlights so far this year.
Yeah, that definitely is the biggest highlight of the fall. The women's team struggling a bit in conference play. The volleyball team, tough homestand, dropping a pair. Getting a win against Savannah State, hopefully can get back into a few conference wins this weekend. But the men's soccer team, 2-0-1 now in conference play. That might sound like there's a long way to go. Really, there's not. There's not a home and home. You play every team one time. So only 2 games remaining, and they've gone through the toughest part of the schedule. A win at Georgia State, a win against Hartwick, a team that has really dominated the conference. A tie against Coastal Carolina, picked to come in and win the conference in its first year. So now trip to Washington, D.C. to take on Howard, a home game against App State. If they win both of those, they'll be tied for the top of the conference, and they'll be heading on to Atlanta with the top seed, a chance to advance.
Pretty impressive so far this year for the Georgia Southern men's soccer team. That'll wrap things up for now. For Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again next week.